The NFL Combine is over. Free agency is about to get started. This is the Big Blue Banter podcast, breaking down Giants coach all-22 film, giving you the latest and breaking news on the team, and adding insight from myself, Dan Schneier of CBS Sports and 24/7 Sports, and my co-host Nick Turchin of Cover One. How you doing today, Nick? You ready to dive into this?
Doing real good. A little shocked, but doing very good.
Yeah, I think we're all a little bit shocked right now that the Giants apparently appeared to be made the decision on Landon Collins. And we'll get into all of that today. So let's just dive right into it right now, the Landon Collins decision. To catch anyone up who's not on top of the news, though we do assume most people listening to this podcast already know this, the Giants informed Landon Collins today that they would not be using the franchise tag on him prior to Tuesday's deadline. Shortly after that, Collins took to Twitter to thank his teammates and thank the organization for his experience and basically signify that he is moving on from the Giants. That, to me, is no surprise for a number of reasons. For starters, the free agent market is very depressed with top-end talent. A player like Landon Collins, who will hit the market, is going to get paid. He's going to be one of the highest-paid players on the market, certainly the highest-paid player at the safety position. That's just how it goes for a 25-year-old. Who has a former All-Pro season under his belt that should have been Defensive Player of the Year. If you look at the resumes for former Defensive Player of the Year from the safety position, like Troy Polamalu, Bob Sanders, etc. He also has 3 Pro Bowls under his belt, Nick. So here we're talking about a 25-year-old. Obviously, Dave Gettleman and the Giants do not believe in the idea of allocating a large chunk of their future and 2019 salary cap space to the safety position or to Collins or whatever that may be. We do not know. But let me get your initial reaction on this decision, Nick.
I think it's, like you said, I think it's pretty surprising. I guess there's 2 different ways you can look at it. I guess the first way to think of it is, well, the chatter has been from some guys on Twitter that the Giants organization didn't think he was as good as coverage as you'd want someone to be who you're going to pay $11+ million to, especially in the safety position. If you just assume that's correct for a second, like, I disagree with it, but just assume that's correct. Why, if that's the case, how many games did Collins play at the end of the year after the trade deadline? Like 3 or 4, right? Max?
Yep, I believe 3 or 4 max. 4 max.
4 max. So nothing, I can almost guarantee you, nothing changed in those 4 games in terms of evaluation. So it means that something happened in the offseason, probably having a lot to do with Gettleman reviewing the tape and looking at everything else. And the point of me saying all this is, if that's the case, then nothing changed since the trade deadline. So he should have been more aggressively pursued to be offloaded then for assets. And what you're constantly seeing is now a pattern, or consistently seeing is a pattern now of unloading assets in ways where they're just discarded. And that really hurts an organization, especially when you have a guy like that. If you, just like you said, is 25 years old, like, you know, maybe the whole goal of the draft is to get the top 100. And like, so anything you can do to get in the top 100 is huge. The Giants only have 2 picks in the top 100. That's a big deal. So whether or not you agree with the coverage aspect or not, I think that was my first reaction, was like, well, then why wasn't he dealt basically at the deadline?
Nick, I think you hit the nail on the head with this one, because we share a similar mindset here. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and argue against Gettleman's evaluation of Collins as a player. Obviously, anyone who's listening to this podcast knows that both me and Nick are very high on what Collins brings to the team, not only from a leadership standpoint, production standpoint, because we obviously don't, we're not here to sit here and wonder why he can't cover Tariq Cohen in the flat with no one over the top, because I can't find too many safeties who can. But what we believe Landon Collins brings to the field is not in agreement with what Gettleman believes, and that I'm okay with, because I don't claim to have all the answers, and I'm not claiming that he does either, but I'm not going to sit here and judge anyone's evaluation of talent and personnel. That, to me, is left for the general manager, and we as analysts or fans, that's just the realization. That's the truth of it. But having said that, what you said makes the most sense here. An evaluation of Collins should not have come after the trade deadline, after the 2018 trade deadline. The Giants had him for 3 or 4 years. They knew their salary cap situation. They knew what it was heading into 2019. They knew what it was moving forward. They know already what kind of player Collins is before even thinking about whether or not he's going to be a part of their future. So like you said, if that's the case, they should have acquired a pick in the top 75, and I believe that was certainly on the table when you look at the fact that Clinton Dix was moved for a 4th-round pick to the Washington Redskins from the Packers, and Collins obviously was going to offer any team a lot more, at least in my opinion, down the stretch of last season than Dix was. Not to mention, Collins was still on a rookie contract as a second-round pick versus Dix, who was drafted in the first round. He had minimal cap hit for any team who wanted to take him on last year, and then they could have been the ones who could decide to franchise tag him and move on from there, or get the compensatory pick back, if they decided not to re-sign him. So there was value there. The Giants, in my opinion, could have certainly gotten a top 75 pick out of Collins. Now everyone wants to talk about, well, it's okay. They're going to end up getting, a third round or fourth round compensatory pick next offseason. But that's not the case. This is something people don't understand about this, Nick, and I'm trying to, bring some light to it on Twitter because I know that, there's not that much information about the compensatory NFL draft pick formula. And even I don't have all the answers there.
Dude, you made a great highlight because when I read your tweet, you educated me. So please continue.
Exactly. Because what people don't understand is the only way the Giants are going to get a third or fourth round compensatory pick back for Collins is if they do next to nothing in free agency, which is certainly not going to be the case because, as we know, and we'll get to in a minute, they're going to cut, most likely, Olivier Vernon and get $8 million in salary cap space back. They're obviously going to have, close to 35, maybe 40 million in cap space when all is said and done with their releases and with their contract restructures. So they're going to probably sign at least one or two edge guys and a right tackle. And those signings will cancel out, according to the compensatory draft pick formula, losing Collins. So eventually the Giants are most likely not going to get anything in return for Collins. And that is a black mark no matter how you look on it on Dave Gettleman's resume. And we're getting to the point, Nick, where I'm starting to worry that is Gettleman's only skill that he brings to this position of general manager talent evaluation, because I do believe he has a good eye for talent evaluation, especially for the most important positions, offense and defensive line. Obviously, quarterback aside, we can talk about, it's hard to tell where he's at there, considering he's never really drafted a quarterback high. But if he is only bringing talent evaluation to the general manager position, then I don't believe that he is going to leave a positive mark on this franchise because there are far too many other factors that go into being a successful general manager at the NFL level.
Yeah, I think that's at this point now, we spent like a season saying, hey, you got to wait to evaluate, At this point now, I think you can start asking that question. It's a year in, and there's not like it's at the end of the regime, but it's like, hey, like why is this happening continuously? And the other side of it too, the one last thing I'll add to your point is from the scouting perspective. Whenever you draft a guy or you bring a guy into free agency, it's like what's the replaceable factor over your current resume or your current your current roster. So like the replaceable value that you have for the hole you just create in your roster, I think for the level of player that you have, you can only really replace with an expensive free agent. But forget the expense part for a second. It actually matters a lot with traits because Collins was such a hybrid. And the current free agent market doesn't have that kind of a hybrid. So then you start looking at about replacing him and potentially in the draft, if that's what you want to do. And you're only talking about like a first round talent that would really have what you would want, especially in a 2 to 3 year time frame for a normal scout's projection. Well, my point is, I'm shocked that this move isn't coupled with a trade or some sort of splash move in its wake. And maybe it's gonna take a while for that to pan out, but I just don't think you can do something this drastic and not have the answer or an answer very, very, very soon. Because although people want to say, hey, he's an in-the-box safety, he's this and that, it's like if Betcher's goal is to be a hybrid defense, which is what not even he, but what Shurmur said from day one, you're taking away like one of the biggest pieces. And so if you're not going to replace that, what are you saying to Betcher?
Yep, and that's exactly right. And it's not just Betcher, and it's not just Shurmur. It's Gettleman, too, who's making that transition, especially at the linebacker position and at the safety position to, like you said, more of a hybrid defense. And for those who believe that, okay, it's fine. The Giants do not want to allocate $12 to $15 million a year to Collins, who they believe is a box safety. That's fine. But what you don't understand is it's not an easy fix. Free agency doesn't work like that. Most free agent contracts end up being deals that teams regret. The only true and tried way to win in this league is by drafting players, having 4 great seasons or 5 great seasons out of them on that cheap rookie deal, and then re-signing them. Then they know the organization, then they know the scheme inside out, and that's how and there's continuity and leadership, and that's how you win. When you go ahead and let a leader of the locker room, the 2018 defensive captain, somebody who we've talked about on numerous occasions, has played through numerous injuries, walk in free agency like this, it doesn't send a good message. But honestly, Nick, it kind of brings me back a little bit to Gettleman's whole reluctance to use the 2019 franchise tag because he believes it creates a negative distraction. And all of this kind of leads me to believe, Nick, and I have no information on this, and I'm not sure if you do either, that there is something deeper with this Collins decision. I'm not sure what it is. It may date back all the way back to the Eli Apple situation in the locker room and how Collins handled that, to maybe some of the differences that Gettleman wants for culture-wise in that Giants locker room. Everything we've heard on Collins, though, until this point, is that he's a great teammate, a great leader, and everything we've seen on the field, Nick, and you made a great point of this throughout our podcast throughout the entire season, is that he is a tough son of a bitch on the field. So moving on from that, Nick, obviously, we can't spend all the podcast on Collins' decision. I know neither of us are too happy about it. But another decision was pretty much made at the Combine, and that was that the Giants seem likely, it's not locked in stone yet, but likely to bring back Eli Manning for the 2019 season. This is not a surprise to me, Nick, and I don't think it's a surprise to you. But I think we both agree this is the wrong decision. As far as what the decision goes into, the Giants believe, according to Shermer, that once they had protection for him, he was a much better player, and the offense, did score a lot of points once the offensive line, I guess came into their own in the second half of the season. But at the same time, as we've gone over on this podcast, breaking down the Coaches All 22, Manning struggled in the passing game in two of those second half season games that everybody lauds him for, against the Titans and against the Bears. Both of those games, the Bears, he had a better second half, but in the first half, he had no answers. So to me, this Manning decision works and ties a bit into the Collins decision, at least for me, because they are going to be allocating $23.5 million of their 2019 cap space to Manning. And when Gettleman was asked about Manning taking a potential pay cut, he basically said, we're not going to approach him about it. We hope he says something to us. But newsflash, Dave Gettleman, Eli Manning's not coming to you guys saying, here, I'll take, slash my salary. Because, would he be amenable to a restructure that adds another year into his contract? Sure, I'm sure he would be. But that's not a good decision for the Giants right now to add another year against the cap to Manning. So were you at all surprised by the Manning decision?
No. I guess
that's not the right question, Nick, because I already outlined. Let me ask you this then. Were you at all – do you have any defense, I guess, for the Manning decision?
The only thought popped in my head, it's like, what if you trade away and get rid of so many assets that you force Manning into retirement? Because one of the things I was thinking is, his dad said that the way that for him to come back, and again, his dad has spoken for him for parts of his career, is that the team would have to be good. The team would have to win.
Right.
And you're taking critical steps in the opposite direction of that at this point. No, I think that, the defense is that it's stability. The defense is that they're looking at this obviously clearly now as a multi-year type of project. And I guess unlike a lot of other front offices in the league, they actually have that window. Because most teams don't have that one. Most owners don't give general managers and front office guys and head coaches that type of 3 to 5 year type window. That's the only reaction I can have to that. It doesn't, I guess the quick answer is I've actually spent a lot of the last 6 weeks relooking at the Giants offense and I think actually kind of going back in terms of overall how we viewed things on this podcast. I think we were way too lenient. That's just the bottom line. The ball was not distributed on time where it needed to be for a large percentage of the time. And so if they want to continue to live in that, then they got that. And the whole idea that Manning played better in the second half, I understand that. But when I looked at the numbers, I put this on Twitter, the biggest delta, the biggest change was how he played versus pressure. He played a lot better versus pressure in the second half of the season.
Yep.
So that's what I actually saw as the biggest difference, not the offensive line play. So, the offensive line is going to continue to get better. Wheeler's not going to be there. But I don't know if that factor is going to get you to a spot where he's better than your free agent replaceable quarterbacks right now. But anyway, that was kind of my initial reaction.
And I'll play devil's advocate for a second with the Manning decision. And for starters, it's an easier decision to make knowing that this is the last year on his contract and they're not committing future years of cap space. And I think that plays a role into it. I do think at the same time, and this is not part of the contrarian defense, that John Mara and the Giants ownership wants to really do right by Manning, which, at times may not lead you to believe that they're doing right by the state of the franchise, but that's a whole nother argument. But aside from just the short-term commitment that it is to Manning, I do believe that you're not going to get his salary is 23.5 against the cap, and it's 17 million they can recoup. They would have 6 million in dead space. So if you count that 6 million in dead cap that they would have from releasing Manning, I'm not sure you're going to definitely get a free agent on the open market who's going to be a lot cheaper than what it would cost plus the 6 million in dead cap to sign over Manning and be competent. Because I think if you're going to go for one of these Bridgewater types or even like a Tyrod Taylor, that might be the lowest bar. That might be the bottom of the range. If you're going for a guy like that, they're going to cost some money. So I get that. And they may also not sign for a short-term deal. And so I understand the idea of not wanting to invest long-term in any of these free agent quarterbacks and the comfort of having a Manning. But at the same time, by releasing Manning and recouping 17 million in cap space, I'm not really sure the Giants are losing that much. Even if, let's say, they went with Kyle Lauletta, Nick, as the starter for next season. Let's just say that. But that probably wouldn't happen. Let's say it was Tyrod Taylor and Lauletta, or Lauletta, Tyrod Taylor, and a rookie they select in the 2019 NFL draft. You're in that scenario, you're allocating next to no salary cap space to the quarterback position. And sure, you could bottom out and have really bad play in your passing game and offense overall. But how much different is that than what they're going to get from Manning? That's the biggest issue that me and you have. Right. Versus some of the people on Giants Twitter who want to maybe retain Manning, because we just don't see the ceiling anymore for Manning. So you're allocating a lot of cap space to someone who doesn't really deliver you any kind of major ceiling. And in the case of maybe the 2019 NFL draft, where they could easily fall in love with one of these defensive playmakers and pass on a quarterback, you're then just putting yourself in a worse position for the 2020 NFL draft. So I think that's kind of where I stand now on the Manning decision. I've come to terms with it, but I just don't see the upside.
In terms of like giving a veteran and a Hall of Famer, in my opinion, like him, the respect, what I just think is really tough is let's just say you draft a quarterback. And let's say the Giants go 2-4. Then what do you do?
Right.
Like, you really want to have that conversation in week 7? Right. You're going to have that conversation in week 14 again, like they did this year. I don't, at some point you have to cut it. And so I don't know. That to me is more of a disrespect than doing it, in a way now. But anyway, that's just a thought.
No doubt. And then moving on, some other news from the Combine. The Giants placed Olivier Vernon on the trade block, at least reportedly. This is no surprise to me. I don't think they'll find any takers. They didn't find any takers at the last trade deadline. It will be easier now, though, I will say, for them to find a trade partner, because the Giants are going to be responsible for a portion of his cap hit in 2019, just based on the bonuses. But if the Giants cannot find a trade partner at all, they're likely going to release him. I can't see any scenario where they bring him back. They've been looking towards moving on from him for a while, and that move will create $8 million in salary cap space, but it'll also bring on an $11 million dead salary cap hit, which is not great for the Giants. But I do believe that if they do, and if and when they do release Olivier Vernon, and we'll get to this in a podcast just before free agency, a preview pod, they will sign at least one or two free agent edge rushers. I've heard some scuttle about the Giants having interest in Zadarius Smith from the Baltimore Ravens, so I will be giving Nick a little homework assignment to look into him at some point. But I think that this is pretty much this was a foregone conclusion we were expecting, right, Nick? Did you see any scenario where Vernon was coming back?
No, I think it's tough. It's tough just because of the money issue. And I think, like you said, the trading issue becomes a little easier now, but it's one of those things, the contract just becomes a total albatross. And it's tough. Very, very tough.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, if Vernon had done a better job of staying healthy during his Giants career, we might be looking at a different scenario here. He's not the fit they want at that outside linebacker position. That's pretty obvious. But at the same time, his production is still pretty solid when healthy, to the point where maybe they would accept, okay, we don't want to take this $11 million dead cap hit. We'll wait one more offseason. But the fact of the matter is this. Even saving that at $8 million might be worth it, because Vernon's been injured for long stretches in each of the last 3 seasons, including his 2016 season when he first signed, where he was really good in the second half. He had 7.5 sacks over his final 9 games, but in the first half he was playing through a broken hand and he was ineffective. So at this point, the injuries, I think, have really told the story there. And then moving on, it appears Janoris Jenkins will not be one of these cap casualties, a guy they're looking to trade, anything like that. And that makes a lot of sense to me for a number of reasons. One, how weak they are at cornerback, and then just 2, because they did restructure his deal prior to last season to create some cap space. And that really should have told everyone right there that they're not going to release him the offseason after. It just would result in too much dead cap money. I mean, I believe they would save $7 million by releasing him, but also take on a $7 million dead cap hit. So did that surprise you at all, Nick, that he wasn't in the trade rumors?
No, and just because, like we said, that if you don't have the replaceable guy and you haven't gotten that from the seasons this year, they need more help, and it doesn't help yourself to get rid of them.
No doubt about that. All right, we're going to move on now, Nick, and try to dive into what we learned or what we feel like we learned from the combine. So I wanted to start it off with asking you any position groups that really stood out to you at the combine.
Besides, the easy answer is the D line. Like the freaks on the D line this year are out of control, right? So that from a quantifiable standpoint, that has to be the biggest thing. I guess too, the overall depth of the running back class, which has nothing to do with the Giants. I think that's just crazy. How I think there's really 25 good running backs. I think it's really hard to differentiate between some of these because of the prevalence of the passing game in college. But yeah, so at the position groups that stood out, you have to say the D line. I think you have to say, freakishness of the D line, and maybe I guess too a little bit of I think the linebacker group has on the insides. The inside linebacker group has really been solidified by the junior class compared to where it was in Mobile, or compared to the seniors in Mobile, I should say. That were the two big things for me. Yeah,
I think for me, actually, Nick, the most interesting parts of the combine were the fact that this tight end class was talked up, to me at least, a lot by people I respect. One of the better tight end classes in a long time. But I felt like it was very top heavy after watching them compete at the combine and just seeing where they stood athletically. And then the other thing that really stood out to me was kind of just the depth of this offensive line class. After, weigh-ins, measurements, and athletic testing, a lot of these guys in most years you see them start to be talked about as, this guy's going to have to kick inside. This guy can't do it. But a lot of the guys, Dalton Risner, for example, he's 6'5", and he tested out fine with arm span and wingspan and arm length. So I think there's going to be more offensive tackles than people expect that could be really quality players in the NFL from this draft class. And I think that's exciting for the Giants, who obviously need to draft an offensive tackle. And then, like you said, I was also impressed with the inside linebacker group and, how some of the players tested. Obviously, Devin Bush and Devin White running 4.4s. Essentially, which is pretty unbelievable. But any players who stood out to you that maybe you saw at the Senior Bowl and thought would boost their stock by the combine, or maybe guys you saw and you thought their stock might decline after the combine, or just any big surprises there?
I think this isn't Giants related, but it's something that I just don't understand. Clelin Ferrell, I think, is an awesome player, and he didn't test off the charts. And the sentiment has now reached on him that he had to test off the charts to basically solidify his position as a middle first rounder, or in the top half of the first round. So now if he's not going to be in that because he tested kind of, I guess, from a pedestrian or in the middle of the road type of standpoint, I just think that that's something where he's a guy as an edge rusher that he's just versatile enough. He's very powerful. He has a pass rush plan, and he's got a lot of moves. And basically, the color that I just got from listening to another podcast actually was how good his first step is and how weird his rush is after the fact. I just see that he has everything you need, and if you only improve a couple things, you're going to have actually a rookie who has multiple moves. There's not many of the edge rushers that actually have solidified multiple counter moves in this. If you're talking about the Allens of the world, kind of down the line to even, I guess, the next guy that really has that is almost like a Ja'Kai Polite. And so my point of saying all this is like, I actually, if he dips into the back half of the first round, I think someone's going to be really lucky and come up and snag him. And that was one where I again was surprised that people think that he needed to test well. I think his tape really kind of says a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up Ja'Kai Polite, and that obviously a kid who, before the combine was projected top 10, top 15, and that's even hard to say because this class is so deep on the defensive line, but, was terrible at the combine. He didn't do well in the interviews. Showed up, they didn't believe in shape, tested extremely poorly, at least compared to the rest of the class that tested incredibly well. And like you said, someone in this top, there's so many awesome defensive line and edge prospects. Someone's going to drop in the back half of that second round. And you know what? Honestly, Nick, I think it's possible someone could drop the Giants at number 37 overall. It's one of the reasons I believe, them holding on to this number 37 overall pick is extremely important when it comes to, the possibility of potentially trading up for a quarterback and whatnot. And we'll get to more of that later. But I think that's what really stood out to me, just, how deep the top of the class is on the defensive line, but also that, some of these guys are gonna change, you're gonna flip, at least guys like Montez Sweat, he ran a 4.41. Everybody knows about that. Obviously, technically faster than Odell Beckham Jr. But in the end, these guys are going to – it all comes down to the tape for some of these general managers, and the Giants general manager, Dave Gettleman, is one of them. He's made that clear in the past. The combine for him is almost exclusively about the interview process. And so, when you mentioned to me you see a guy like Clelin Ferrell on tape and he's really, really impressive to you, that may not be the case for all, 32 NFL GMs. And I think that's where value is created in every draft class, and that's where maybe the Giants can strike from a talent and personnel evaluation standpoint. But I did want to talk about a few other things that intrigued me from the combine, Nick. And I thought it was really interesting to hear Pat Shurmur talk about Kyler Murray for a couple of reasons. For starters, he threw out a stat that obviously proved he's been watching a lot of Murray. Talked about how, there's a lot of discussion about his height, but he only had 5 balls batted down at the line of scrimmage during the 2018 season. He also mentioned that, he went back and has seen every single play from Murray during the 2018 season, and he called his tape out. He called him outstanding on tape. My question for you, Nick, is this. Do you think that Kyler Murray is as outstanding on tape as Pat Shurmur does? Do you think he's someone who could be in play for the Giants? And then lastly, where does he stand currently on your quarterback rankings?
Yeah, he's got to be top 3, if not. Like, I haven't really filed through, and I'm probably not going to really divvy between the top group. He's just in the top group. It's really him, Haskins, and whoever you want to think about for the toss in there at the number 3 level, the third spot there. I definitely think he is. I think he's electric. I think he reads the field really, really well, and I think that I'll just address some guys think the concerns are that he kind of likes to take off, and I think that if you kind of study Lincoln Riley a lot and kind of go back to Mayfield, whenever he goes out of structure, it almost looks like he's in structure because he's making the right decisions. And that's at the college and at the NFL level. At both levels, it looks like he was very, very well prepared to be off structure. That's out of structure. That's a little surprising at the college level. I think that was something that Riley really, really helped his quarterbacks with. And I think when I saw some instances where guys didn't like him taking off for big gains, and they made the point that, hey, you can't do this at the NFL level. And my point was, well, if you're making a read and you think that you're just as good a position as the wide receiver you're throwing to in terms of the angle on the defender you're trying to beat in the passing scheme, well, then take off because there's no risk. And so if you have that type of like strategic taking off, strategic running as almost a third read in a progression, then you got to be down with it because that guy's like the most explosive guy in the field, right? So overall, I think that you're looking at someone who's going to be in the top 5, almost no matter what happens. I think is going to be in the top 5, the top 5 spots here. So I think the ceiling's there, and people worry about the frame. And the one last thing I'll note, which is kind of cool, I got this tidbit from a coaching clinic. If you go to an Oklahoma practice, they never make a throw in a clear lane at all during practice. Skelly, 7-on-7, whatever it is, there's bags in front of them that they have to negotiate to throw the ball, even if it's on air. And I just thought that was cool that you have habit levels, how you have habits being built at the college level for him to secure throwing lanes that, if you're going to worry about his height, that's not going to be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, Nick, for me, I've done a lot more study now on these top quarterbacks in the class. And I'm ready to say, I've said it before, and I'm ready to say he's the QB1 for me in this class. And I think a lot of what you said is really interesting. I have a few other points to add, but I did find what you said extremely interesting about sometimes, maybe he's running because he believes it's the best option based on his read of the play. And not to mention, there are a lot of times when you watch Drew Lock or Dwayne Haskins on tape, and they just don't have an option for pressure. And sometimes when people think Murray's bailing too quick, it's actually him bailing at the right time. Because if you look at some of the other quarterbacks in this class, like Lock and Haskins, they're trying to bail and they can't get away. But most importantly for me with Murray, the reason why, I could be talked into the Giants trading up to number 1 overall to draft him. And honestly, Nick, you say top 5. I'm pretty confident at this point Murray will be the number 1 overall pick, whether that be to the Arizona Cardinals or a team that trades up for him. That's kind of where I see this going. But why I can be convinced on trading up for Murray, the two things that stand out for me, Nick, are just number 1, accuracy. And I'm not talking about like general accuracy, the ability to get the ball in the space where a wide receiver can catch it. I'm talking about pinpoint accuracy. And I learned these terms from following Matt Wallman's work, who I really think everyone who listens to this podcast would enjoy. You can find him on Twitter at Matt Wallman. I don't know his exact Twitter handle, but check out Matt Wallman. And, he really got me onto this. And with Murray, what I mean by pinpoint accuracy is he hits on such a high percentage of his throws, Nick, the ball is placed in the exact perfect spot for yards after the catch. And I haven't seen that from any quarterback, and it's not even close in this class to me. Murray's pass, and this is especially true on kind of those mesh routes that we see Pat Shurmur run a lot, those under routes. That ball is put in such a good spot for his receivers to run after the catch. It's also equally as impressive, his pinpoint accuracy up the seam. It's another area where I see him putting the ball in perfect spots for run after the catch. And then you can't create, in this class, at least in my opinion, what Murray's able to do, not only off structure as you talk about, but in the big play game. With the Kansas City Chiefs offense, a lot of, in my opinion, what made them so special is that they had an element of big playability in every single game they played. And that's what I saw on tape when I watched Kyler Murray at Oklahoma. I haven't seen that in every game I've watched of Dwayne Haskins or Drew Lock or any of the other guys. And I'm not saying that's totally a bad thing. You'll watch some games where Haskins just consistently picks apart a defense. For example, against Maryland, the game I was just watching, Haskins consistently picked them apart in the intermediate range. And, he had a great comeback win there for Ohio State. It was a great game. But just that element of big playability that Murray brings with his arm, and with his legs, but not only with his legs, with his arm. His accuracy on the deep ball is uncanny. No one else in this class, in my opinion, is as accurate as him on the deep ball. And the ability to just throw from different arm angles and trajectories, all of that to me, Nick, outweighs the negatives that may come with his frame, his size, anything else like that. So for those reasons, I would be open to them trading up for him. I'm not sure that will be in the Giants' plan, though.
Yeah, this is for the listeners. What Dan's describing on a shallow cross is called a runner's ball. And so basically when people think throwing screens and shallow crosses and balls to the flat are kind of just like get it out there. If you put the ball in the correct placement, it's a placement versus accuracy discussion. They can actually in stride continue to run with the ball. And yes, that is something that has been lacking with this team for multiple years now. And it does show up on the tape. And what you saw this year with the Giants love to run shallow cross across the field as a clear out concept where the other side of the field was running three verts. And the whole goal there is to beat the flat defender on that side. He has to have a runner's ball. And so, yeah, that's exactly what Dan's talking about for what they were doing. And it wasn't just air raid concepts at, down in Oklahoma. So, yeah, absolutely. That part of his game is something where, it's something that shines and the other quarterbacks can get there for sure. But it's something that he's going to kind of be ready with day one.
Yeah, and I don't want to be on the record here saying the other quarterbacks aren't doing that. I've watched a lot of Dwayne Haskins, and he does throw excellent balls on those same exact routes, runner's balls, like you said. I just don't think he does it as consistently as Murray, and he certainly doesn't do it as consistently in the flats. That's where Murray's accuracy seriously shines, in the flats, the running backs. But what I do think both quarterbacks can add, in addition to what you said, which is, runner's ball on those mesh and short crossing routes, something the Giants haven't had. It's also just red zone efficiency. Both of those players are extremely accurate in the red zone. I do honestly think Murray, again, in the red zone is more accurate than Haskins, but also they both offer, and I was surprised to see this when I rewatched a lot of Haskins' film, they both offer the zone read option. I mean, Haskins obviously isn't as dynamic as Murray running those concepts, but he can get there, and he forces the defense to at least consider that option. Those two things excite me when you think about, if the Giants get their hands on either of those guys, it could really help improve the offense from day one, in a lot shorter of a time span than people may think. But moving on a little bit, Dave Gettleman, I thought it was interesting with how Dave Gettleman, a guy who, if for nothing else is brutally honest with his plans, talked up how important it was for finding a quarterback, in this draft class, and how you can't wait for the 2020 class, no matter who may be in that from a prospect standpoint. And I think that's a good sign for this franchise, because I've said in the past, Nick, and I do believe this, every year the Giants wait to draft a quarterback is just one extra wasted year of Saquon Barkley and Odell Beckham's prime. Because, again, if you look at, the breakout quarterbacks from last year, Nick, Mitchell Trubisky, Patrick Mahomes, Jared Goff the year before last year, what do they all have in common? It was their second NFL season. And anytime you bring in a rookie, if they do it this class or next, he's going to probably need a year to get accustomed to the NFL, to his teammates, rapport with his wide receivers. And I just think at this point, you have to kind of factor that in when making your decision on whether or not to draft a quarterback. Would you agree with that, or would you say that that's going too far in the direction of drafting for need?
I don't know. I don't think it is, just because you need it's the position that has the highest amount of impact that you absolutely need to win, to consistently get in the playoffs, right? So you have to take your shots to get that guy, even if that means for some regimes they get fired, but you take a whiff and miss. So by not making that move, you're effectively just prolonging the decision that you have to make, at some point. And so, and the other side of it too is that none of these front offices, although people like to think this, none of these front offices are making judgments on what they think quarterbacks are going to be like in a year. But the quarterbacks in college are going to be like for the next draft class. It's physically impossible to do that. So it's not for need at that point. It's when you have the chance to pull the trigger, basically just swing your sword.
Exactly. For anyone who thinks the Giants should wait for the 2020 class, I really wish they would consider how difficult it might be for the Giants to acquire their top quarterback or any top quarterback next draft. Obviously there's no guarantee they'll have the number 6 pick or anywhere close to that. And while they might, it's not something you can bank on. But moving on, Nick, I did want to get your thoughts on what you saw from Dwayne Haskins on Saturday at the Combine when he threw.
Basically I like the fact that I liked his attitude more than any of the throws that he had. Basically it was that he all he does is throw, so that's what he wants to do there. And it was kind of thrown in the face of Kyler Murray a little bit, who did not throw.
Right.
So I kind of like that competitive attitude in a kind of a playful way, but in the right mindset way. And I think that, honestly, I'm not going to lie, throws on air, it was cool to see. But I think his interview in front of a lot of reporters went a long way with Giants media, which is part of the battle that you have here. So I think he kind of checks that box, and that he's not, he's well prepared and well spoken, and gives respect like at all times, and he's very, very intelligent. So it's like I think you checked all those boxes there in front of a lot of cameras.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I'm not making much of what any of those guys did from an R talent standpoint throwing at the Combine. I think, as Gettleman's made clear, and as I would agree with, it's more about what he does in the interview process, not only, like you said, not only the private interviews, but also, like you said, in front of all reporters and everything. Everything you read on Haskins is that he is going to be a team first guy, a really good face of the franchise. And as I've gone back, Nick, and looked at more of Haskins, I guess I'll say I'm having more of an appreciation for his arm talent. While I don't really think he has that big play arm that can, make, like I said, every game with Kyle Murray, there's a big play. That's not the case with Haskins. But I do believe that in the short and intermediate range, he's got really good. He has a better arm talent than I thought. He's more accurate, more pinpoint accurate in that area of the field than I thought, and he has more zip and velocity than I had seen at times. It varies throughout different games depending on, obviously, how he's dealing with pressure and whatnot. But I do think that, like you said, most of what we saw him throwing against air is not going to factor much into the Giants' evaluation. But I did want to talk about another storyline, Nick, from the Combine, and that's the Josh Rosen rumors. So obviously, for those who aren't caught up, but I believe everybody knows this by this point, there's widespread league assumption, I guess I would say, that the Cardinals will draft Kyler Murray at number 1 overall and look to trade Josh Rosen. One GM told Peter King, and you can, be the judge of your own on the validity of this report, but told Peter King that he wouldn't receive the Cardinals wouldn't receive more than a 3rd round pick. I believe eventually that report is pretty inaccurate from the sense that they don't know what the bidding will be for Rosen. All it takes is one team to offer up a big, to be desperate enough to offer a premium pick to make it happen. Like, who's to say the Redskins won't use their 16th pick just to have an immediate starter in Rosen? Because I believe personally he'd be a perfect fit for Gruden's scheme there. But my point to you, Nick, is this. I think that if Rosen is put on the trade block, the Giants should certainly be very, very interested in make an offer for Rosen. Where do you stand on that?
I think I tweeted this out just for guys that follow me on Twitter, so it's not like I'm always just recycling what I say on Twitter to get the disclaimer. Right when the news first hit, I guess it was a few weeks ago, I think that Gettleman should wait no matter what. And now, in the wake of the Combine, you can kind of see how the market shapes up. My first reaction to this was, there's no way this deal happens unless if it's owner to owner, because it's too sensitive a situation with the guy who you just drafted as your FQB, quote unquote, and now you're looking to unload him. And not having ever done that in my life before, but having handled like larger size transactions, like whenever you start doing that, you don't start making phone calls. Like, you don't want this guy on the block. Like, that it just becomes a shit show of a situation. Right. And so you end up hurting yourself. So in the end, it's like you want to talk to select demand. And Steve Keim said this. I can't believe he fucking said it, but he said this, that he's a franchise quarterback for now. So he's given this signal, and now they're kind of, I guess, assessing what they're doing. The bigger report that I would talk about that I would just say was complete BS was that what's his face? My mind's trying to blank their head coach. I'm having a brain fart. Yeah, that he was out speaking that he was talking to people in Indianapolis, basically saying that it was a done deal that they were going to take Murray, that the Cardinals were going to take Murray. There's no way that was the case, but clearly people are putting signals into the marketplace that it may be the case. So who's manipulating who, I'm not really sure. But my point is, I think that you could make a bid for him, and if Gettleman was going to do it, I would wait to the very, very end. If you felt compelled and you could somehow get a sense of what the bid ask is, what the bid offer is, then at the end, if you just to make your assessment then versus going down and helping support the market right now, which apparently at its worst case is a third round bid. I think that, I guess what I'm trying to say is if you could get him for a second rounder, that'd be pretty good. Right. Yeah. And so, and that's again, with the evaluation that you actually want him. And so I think if they stand that that's their decision in the end, then I would wait to the end, wait as long as possible to basically help themselves, because I don't think Arizona has a lot of legs to stand on when they're in a very sensitive situation. They can't offer him to multiple people and then not. Let's just put it this way: some people could have even floated the idea that they would draft both and basically let both play and push both and then trade one after a year. But again, the more time you let go from Rosen's rookie contract, the less valuable he becomes. So I think they want to do this soon if that's the case, and I think the Giants want to wait as long as they can.
Yeah, I actually do. I see what you're saying on that last point, Nick, but they're not going to. I don't think there's any chance they do that strategy of waiting a year, because for starters, like you said, his value drops significantly because you lose a year of that rookie cheap deal, and it's already dropped because of that. That's part of the reason his trade value isn't as high now. But also, and that's just like anything. When you buy a car, the value depreciates. But at the same time, I believe it would create a distraction they probably don't want in the locker room with back-to-back first-round picks on the roster at quarterback. It's not a good look. It's not a good look for the team, for anything. So I do believe he would be traded. And obviously, we did this. We started up this podcast, Nick, after last year's draft. And anyone who followed me all the way back then, or anyone who hasn't, Rosen was my QB1 from the last draft class. I believe he saw the field at UCLA better than any quarterback in the class, and in a class that included Sam Darnold, who saw the field extremely well. I thought Rosen's mechanics, both footwork and throwing mechanics, made him one of the most accurate passers. I do believe he's a little bit scheme dependent. I think he's best in a play action based scheme and from under center and in rhythm. So I think that there are ways to get to him with pressure, as we obviously saw last year in his rookie season behind the worst offensive line in football, according to literally every single any single outlet you see. Sorry about that. Just had a little bit of we lost track a little bit there, but got a little bit of message from work. But anyway, back to what I was saying. I believe that all of those things are true still with Rosen going into this next year. And if the Giants, Nick, can land a situation where they can get Rosen for their second-round pick and then trade back from number 6 to number 10 or number 13 and recoup that second-round pick, I think that's obviously the win-win for this franchise, where they would get not only their quarterback of the future, even though they lose a year of his rookie contract, but also they would get back that second-round pick and still get a top 10 player on the defensive side of the ball. Do you see that as a possible scenario for them?
Yeah, I think all but the end, the second part of that. I just yes, that's what they would want to do, but I don't know if they would. I don't know if they've proven to be nimble enough to actually get that done. But I think they could make the move for Rosen and then kind of sit and see what's what, which I think would kind of be a mistake. I think they want to do what you're saying. I think though, it comes down to what the room feels like about Rosen now at this time. After a year, and the positive guys who were lobbying for him last year, or who were higher on him last year within the decision maker. So I think it's a possibility.
Yeah, and we don't know the factors as far as where the Giants stand on him now, or where they stood on him at any point in the evaluation. But I will say this about Rosen: they did reportedly interview him and meet with him more than any other quarterback prospect in the 2018 class. So they certainly, at least maybe it was a bluff, but they certainly showed interest in Rosen last offseason. And, like I said, with regards to Rosen, I I do believe that he shouldn't be judged entirely off his rookie season, based on the fact that, like I said, he was behind not only the worst offensive line in football by, I was trying to say every metric. Football, I was trying to look it up, but Football Outsiders has it, Pro Football Focus, and even ESPN's win block rate has Arizona dead last. But they also had injuries across the line. So, like I said, it does depend on the Giants' evaluation, but I do believe the best scenario for this franchise probably this offseason would be to have their cake and eat it too by getting Rosen and still getting a top 10 or 13 if they trade back to 10 or 13 with Miami or Denver defensive player in this class. But moving on a bit past Rosen to someone else who we saw actually at the Combine, what did you think of Tyree Jackson? Because he was someone who stood out to me when I watched him throw at the Combine.
I was surprised how fast he was and how athletic he looked actually in the 40. And I won't lie, I did not even see him throw. But going back to the kind of the mobile tape is still going to be there, and it's just the inconsistencies in his lower body. It just makes it seem like he's going to be someone who really has to sharpen that up, and that's going to be a tough one for the next level, especially at an impact right away. So I think he's interesting, but you're talking about a round 4, round 5, round 6 type of guy, that type of thing.
Yeah, I think in the end you're going to be right about Jackson as far as where you should take him. I don't think that will happen. I think he will be selected in the 2nd or 3rd round, Nick, just because I think all it takes is one general manager to fall in love with him. And that's kind of how it goes. And when you look at him, 6'7", 249, ran a 4.59, great natural arm talent. But like you said, when I went back and watched him at Buffalo, I was actually a little bit surprised, Nick, at how inaccurate he was and how kind of non-advanced he looked as a quarterback. I guess that's not the best way to describe it, Nick, but that's kind of just from a mechanic standpoint and the delivery of the football. It was not on point in a lot of ways. He underthrew a lot of the outside the hash routes, the deeper routes, the back shoulder fades, things like that. He wasn't all there as a quarterback, but it is important to keep in mind that this offseason he's privately training with Jordan Palmer, the guy who obviously also trained Sam Darnold and Josh Allen last offseason and Deshaun Watson before that. And he said that this is the first private training he's ever had as a quarterback, which I found interesting, Nick. He is a self-taught quarterback. He said that he would watch YouTube videos on basically how to play the position, and he tried to teach himself the quarterback position. And you can obviously see that when you watch him play at Buffalo. But we're talking, he is still a guy, 6'7", great arm talent from what I've seen. I mean, he was ripping the ball at the Combine. And I think that was on purpose. Steve Smith, obviously, of NFL Network, came over and was like, you got to slow the speed up to give these guys a chance. But I think his agent might have, this is just a little small conspiracy theory I have. His agent might have been like, let it rip at the Combine. Show these evaluators the difference in your arm talent versus the rest of this field that was there. So I do think that he's got enough of those traits, Nick, that someone will fall in love with him and draft him early. But I agree with you. If it's the Giants, I would prefer it to be day 3 or nothing.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely.
Another guy who caught my attention is Brian Burns, a player who I talked about last week before the Combine as someone who wouldn't surprise me if he was on the Giants' radar and, evaluated as one of their 5 best players overall on their big board. And at the Combine, I wanted to see what he could do from an agility and lateral agility standpoint. And he tested out in the 82nd percentile on the 3-cone, which was extremely impressive to me to go along with his 4.53 40-yard dash at 249 pounds, and he carries that weight extremely well. He also was in the 98th percentile with his broad jump, an extremely explosive athlete, clearly with the requisite agility needed, and obviously the raw speed at the position. On tape, I mean, from what I've seen, and I have not seen that much, Nick, he looks really good. And I will say this, while I haven't seen that much tape on Brian Burns, I have tracked a lot of his actual raw stats. And from a pressure standpoint, and again, I believe that's probably the most underrated stat when evaluating defensive linemen because so much is made of sacks, which are, meanwhile, pressures force incomplete passes, errant throws, and sometimes turnovers. I believe he had the 6th most pressures in the nation from any edge rusher, and he was number 8 overall pass rusher. And these stats are both according to Pro Football Focus. So I like Burns a lot. Where do you stand on Burns as of right now?
Not gonna lie, I've not seen his tape, but you gotta like the ability to. Look, everyone knew looking at his measurables coming out of the season that he had to gain weight, right? Well, he gained weight and kept the athleticism. That's huge.
Yep.
And, you're doing it in a short amount of time. So you're just checking boxes for the guys that want it. And, that's just going to go – that goes so far with the evaluation versus the guys that just kind of show up. And so that's a big deal. I think the biggest thing for the Giants, and this, I think we may have had this conversation already, but I'm not sure if we did. It gets into if he's going to be a potential Giant guy, it gets into potential Giants edge pass rusher. It gets into how much they want him to actually cover and to drop off into coverage, which was a higher amount last year, or if they're willing to bend those prerequisites because of the production they can get. And I don't think that they can go into the season and go into week 4 and week 5 and not have and have the same pass rush pressures that they've had in the past year. I don't think the defense can function. They need to get to the quarterback. So, are they going to bend on that if they have a guy who's clearly incredibly athletic, clearly shows that he can change, right? I think changing the willingness and the ability to change and be coachable is such a huge part of this. Are they willing to take a guy like that may not be the exact fit, but just fit enough? And you're looking at this guy who, I guess you're thinking about the back half of the first round. That's kind of where he's projected now. I think, and I'm guessing there. I'm not going to lie. I think he could go higher than that for sure. But it's one of those guys where if he's around, like that may be the guy to move for sure.
I actually see it a little differently than you, Nick. I think he's going to end up being a top 10 pick, top 15, top 10 pick. I think that. What'd you say?
Yeah, totally. Again, totally could be, and especially going forward and being a BC guy, absolutely, definitely could be.
And he's a guy who I really and I think there are enough, potential, I wouldn't say flaws, but drawbacks that he might be more in that 10 to 15 range. He's the guy I would be targeting if they do, what I would consider their dream scenario and trade their second round pick for Rosen and then trade back at 6 to pick back up a second rounder and get to 10 or 13 with Denver, Miami. So that's just somebody who I'm keeping an eye on. But moving on, I wanted to wrap up with a couple more guys who really intrigued me, really just from testing out, just unbelievably athletic for their size. Devin Bush and Devin White, the two inside linebackers from Michigan and LSU. What did you make of those two?
Freakish speed. I was actually listening to Bush's coordinator speak the day of his of his testing, and Don Brown called a 4.4, so I guess he missed expectations by 4 seconds. The freakish speed. I have, from what I've seen on tape, what has jumped at me the most, and I didn't know this and didn't really understand this, but even for his size, his use of hands is freaking awesome. And his strength at the point of attack is awesome. And I saw why in his clinic, because the drills they do are just unbelievable for inside linebackers. So you have a guy who's really fundamentally strong, and not to call it out like this is actually completely unfair kind of like comparison, but it's the exact opposite of the way Ogletree plays the linebacker position. Ogletree kind of struggles when blockers come at him and struggles against interior runs. It's the way it is. He makes good plays, but consistently that's not his thing. And so it was interesting to see a guy of like the same size be able to really handle it, And White's not that dissimilar. White's bigger, right, by about 10 pounds, I think. Overall, I don't think either are going to be in the Giants' plan just because they're going to be gone before they can take them. And I don't think that they value that position highly enough or as high as these guys are going to go. But two really, really awesome prospects.
Yeah, I think any chance the Giants had at getting Bush in the second round, which was on my radar, was kind of walked away after the combine, because someone that freakishly athletic is just going to end up probably being a first-round pick, I think, or at least somebody selected in those 5 picks before the Giants in the second round. But, it's still, I think, a little bit in play. I wouldn't totally rule it out just yet. And I'm with you. I think that they can make a massive, massive impact on the Giants defense. But let's jump over to the section of the podcast, which is obviously my favorite part. And I know it's Nick's too. Questions from you guys, the listeners. So we'll start with Big Blue Kane, who asks, now that Landon Collins is gone, what defensive players could DG be looking to use that $11 million in cap space on?
Well, you got to think they bring in some safety at some point, right? Like, they're not going to piecemeal the safety position again. So I guess that's the first one. I think it has to be that. And if it's defensive players, they got a lot of needs. I think it's safety and defensive back needs are the first two glaring ones. And one last thing that I'll make to this point is in terms of free agency. I heard this on a competitor NFC East podcast talking about an NFC East competitor. Good teams use free agency to secure their needs so that they can draft however they want to, based upon basically their draft boards.
Yeah, so the Giants aren't going to have that luxury this year, Nick.
But what's interesting though is they need to take massive strides in getting these holes plugged. And so yeah, I think it's 1 to 2 players now at least. That's a safety / linebacker hybrid at least.
I think honestly, to answer your question, Big Blue Cane, and to not refute what Nick said, but add a little bit of a different spin, I guess. I think that Gettleman's kind of playing this almost like Madden. I really do. I think all this cap space he's clearing by not re-signing Landon Collins and whatnot, he's going to use. And I actually think he's banking on the fact that the safety market is going to be as deflated as it was last season when guys like Trey Boston, coming off a great 26-17 when you really looked at it, got a really small, short, not expensive 1-year deal last offseason. And he's banking on that, I think, to find multiple safeties. And I think he's going to use the cap space, and I mentioned this earlier, on 3 positions. 2 positions, but 3 players. Outside linebacker, I think he's going to sign 2. I really do feel strongly about that. And right tackle. And I think he's going to look at it, like I said, like a Madden, fill your holes and do the best you can with these big deals. And what that's going to do, like I mentioned earlier, it's going to cancel out that compensatory pick they would have got for Collins. That I know. But yeah, I think that money personally is going to go to outside linebacker and the right tackle position. And then obviously right guard as well. Remember, Jamon Brown's not under contract. Andrew asks us, if the Giants do trade 37 for Rosen, you've stated they should trade back from 6. Is there any player who could fall to 6 that would convince you to stay at 6 and make the pick?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, not for like, but like, if it depends on how many teams move into 1 and 2 to get a quarterback, right? If they have it. So if you have this isn't going to happen, but if you think about like Quinnen Williams, which is insane, but it maybe, right? Or if you look at, if you value, but Bosa's not going to fall that far. It's not the way it's going to work. But I think something like that, Williams would absolutely make me stay, or whoever you're going to have at the 4th and 5th at that point from the defensive line standpoint. If that's Ed Oliver or whoever that is, yeah, you could absolutely get that type of chance to get a really good player at 6.
So I think, Nick, for the most part, a lot of the guys that you could get at 6, you might be able to get at 10, depending on how teams value these certain guys because they're so close. I mean, to me, there's definitely scenarios where between 6 and 10, or let's say they trade back to 13 with Miami, between 6 and 13, there will be guys like DJ Metcalf coming up the board to some team that just, can't help themselves. And players like that, I can totally see that being the case. So I think for the most part, I'm fine with. That's why I like the idea of trading back. But I'll throw 3 guys out there who I might not trade back for if they're sitting there at 6. Quinnen Williams, who you mentioned, who might just be there because he's an interior guy, and interior guys don't get valued as highly, but he's unblockable. Josh Allen, who I've been big on the entire draft process and don't see myself changing. Seen enough of him live to know that he'll be a game changer. At least that's what I'm banking on. And then lastly, like you said, Bosa, who obviously I don't think is going to drop to 6 either. But, to answer his question, those are the guys who would make me think twice. We got another Andrew who asks, have you guys seen any of Ben Perkervin, Washington? Do you think he'll be available in rounds 2 through 4? He doesn't exactly fit Gettleman's mold. He's only 6 foot tall. But what do you guys think of his abilities in coverage and safety play or sideline to sideline play?
I'm not gonna lie. I've not seen him. I haven't got a chance to take a look at him. I mean, the Washington secondary historically, they pumped out some awesome guys. So you're getting kind of like defensive back so that kind of fits in there. And my memory's being jogged a little bit. I think he's supposed to be is he supposed to be Chancellor like, and that's why Seattle likes him? I can't remember.
Yeah, he's Seattle likes him because he's a spark freak. I think he ran 4. I'm trying to remember now. I had just had it up. I think he ran a 4.54 and he just tested, and he had the best 3-cone time of any linebacker at the combine. So he was a freak, or 4.56 he ran with a 6.85 3-cone, which is insane at 230 pounds.
It's like crazy. That 3-cone is insane. Yeah. So for that type of freak, I think. But again, I can't comment to his abilities of coverage, and I don't know. I've not seen him. I haven't heard his name a ton for projection standpoint, but I haven't done a ton outside of seniors. So
yeah, he's considered more of kind of a day 3 prospect. At least he was going into the combine, and that's kind of why I don't really change my opinion of him just yet, because they expected him to test out as an athletic freak, and obviously he was even more freakish than people thought. But that's not enough for me right now to boost him into like my radar yet. But as far as answering his question goes, I think Andrew kind of broke it down best himself. Like, if he doesn't exactly fit Gettleman's mold, I'm not sure he'll be somebody they're targeting just because the things he accomplished at the combine and whatnot. Though I will say this: a lot of the people who I follow on Twitter who are big, who covered the Pac-12 were big fans of his production too at Washington. So definitely someone to at least keep an eye on. Andrew also asked, who's got a better long-term future, the Giants or the Mets? I'm gonna jump in real quick with a fun answer here, Nick, and just say the Giants for me. When this question's asked to me about any NFL team versus any MLB team, my answer will always be the NFL team. It's so much easier to turn things around, in my opinion, in the NFL than it is the MLB or the NBA, for that matter, or any league without a salary cap. You don't have that cap, and obviously the Mets are spending a little more this offseason, not in the ways I would like them to spend. And obviously, as Andrew knows, I'm a Mets fan as well. But I'll always go with the NFL team there. Do you have anything to add there, Nick?
Yeah, I think you buttoned that one up pretty good.
Yeah, I don't think it's right up your alley anyway. Rob asks, most people don't seem to care at this point about about Kyle Lauletta and being a viable contender for the starting job at some point. What facts have we gotten to draw the conclusion that has no chance of being the starter?
I mean, not much other than the evidence that they haven't played him. And you and I are both like higher on him in terms of having a shot, and we understand it's a shot coming from where he was coming from, and it's something that really wasn't given a great shot on the field, and maybe there's more behind that, or whatever the position may be. Maybe I genuinely think at this point that they're hoping that he develops into their backup. We haven't talked about this in the podcast, but I was kind of shocked that they signed Tanny, other than I guess the fact that it's a familiar face in camp, and you can always cut a guy at that point. But I don't understand the dynamic here, and it doesn't really make any sense to me. And we don't have a lot of facts. And it's just one of those things where you kind of are going to have to judge from their actions, not from what we're actually seeing.
Just to touch on the Tanny signing real quick, Nick, I think we got to wait a little on that for the financial details. They had a similar deal a couple off seasons ago, or a couple around this time, a few off seasons ago with Josh Johnson. 2-year deal was announced as, but with no guaranteed money. He was released at the end of training camp, or with very little guaranteed money. So I actually think that's probably what this Tanny deal is. I think he's going to be a camp body. But as far as Lauletta goes, the only evidence I would say that we do have, Rob, is that, first of all, he was a 4th-round pick. So the Giants did not use a second. They did not use either of their thirds. And when they drafted him, they called it a value they couldn't, pass down. That doesn't sound to me like a player they're completely sold on, just a player who they think they're getting good value on. And then the other thing I would say is at the Combine, Gettleman made a really interesting comment when he said, I want to, what are you looking for in a quarterback? And he said, looking for a quarterback who you don't have to go to sleep every night worrying if he's going to show up to work on time. And that, may have not been about Kyle Lauletta, but at the same time, Kyle Lauletta did not show up on work on time one day during the Giants' past season when he got that ticket, when he was rushing to work, when he got that driving ticket or whatever that was, whatever he did with the cops, evaded traffic. So I thought that comment was a little interesting from Gettleman. I will say that. Moving on, though, Client 9 asks, guys, if it's true that DG doesn't value the safety position, just like Reese didn't value linebacker, can you speak to the positions that DG does value and make some of their sense of their positional value system?
I mean, outside of the line, right? I mean, we know he values the line, right?
Yep.
And we know he values the tackle position. Outside of that, I guess he spent the second overall pick on a running back, but he did not provide a viable RB3 really at any point in the season. So I don't know that he values the running back position. On the tight end side, the same. I really don't know. I don't see it as strong. I know Simonson at times played well this season, but I was surprised at that signing to bring him back for another year. And if they keep Ellison on at the current pay level, I'll be surprised there too. So I honestly can't, outside of the fact that he likes bulky, he likes big linemen. He likes big linemen. He likes, and he's willing to say that he's wrong on linemen. And he's willing to say that he likes versatile linemen too, because that's what I would call Jamon Brown. But outside of that, I really don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think we also know that he has a kind of a revamped view of how he wants to build a linebacker position with a lot of hybrid type players there, and speed and athleticism at the second level. And I do think that factors in also because of the defensive scheme that he has going right now with James Bettcher, and what they're trying to do there. But, I think we got to take one more offseason before we can really dive more into that. We need to see what he does this offseason, where he uses his cap money that he's freeing up and where he uses his draft capital. And then I think we'll get a much better idea, especially because they have so many day 3 picks. I think that's where we can, really learn about where he wants to add depth, because he spent his whole entire first offseason using the depth spots on his roster to fix the special team. And, for all the bad the Giants did last year, they did improve their special teams. It went from number 32 ranked according to DVOA by Football Outsiders to number 3 in just one season. So something has to be said about that. But like I said, I think we'll learn more after his second offseason. Art asks, if the Chiefs franchise Dee Ford, what do you think the odds are that a trade happens for Olivier Vernon? Player swap seems to work better for each team's scheme, and Giants are absorbing some of OV's cap hit. It seems that both teams could negotiate contracts to help out their caps.
The scheme fit would definitely help both. I've gotten pitched a lot better Twitter trades in the past 5 days than I've seen any actual trade go through in the NFL. A lot of these trades are great ideas, but they happen they happen in the NHL, they happen in the MLB. It's just a much more liquid market for the player to player trades, which is just too bad effectively. So I think that although the idea is certainly sound, I think that the odds are low. And the other side of it too is you got to look at OV's contract as the biggest issue to this right off the bat, right?
Yeah, here's the deal. I don't think a trade's going to happen at all because of the fact that OV's contract doesn't just end after this season, right, Nick? We're talking about a situation where whoever trades for him in a hypothetical situation where a trade might go through would have to take on his contract for the 2020 season. And they, then the dead cap goes to them if they want to release him next offseason. The dead cap for 2019 is going to go to the Giants no matter what, even if they trade him. But that's not the case for 2020. So I think that factors. And I also think the Chiefs are looking to reallocate that money away from, a guy like Houston, a guy like Ford, let's say, or Houston on the defensive line, and toward different positions. They might be in the market for Landon Collins. I think they will be. And they also have salary cap issues of their own, by the way, after, signing Sammy Watkins to such a large deal last offseason. So I don't see that happening personally, but you never know. Client 9 asks us, guys, I get the feeling Gettleman will be going for a defensive stud at number 6, which is 2 years in a row with the top 6 pick not spent at QB. Is there an actual plan in this organization post Eli, or does Dave Gettleman surprise me and trade up? Or is he going to just take another project like Tyree Jackson?
Maybe we're just missing the plan because it's a lot longer term than what we're used to in the current NFL cycle, right, of front offices and coaches, which is really, really short. So maybe because of the Giants organization, Gettleman knows that he has a 3 to 5 year window to do this in, which again, I don't think really any general manager has that type of leeway. And I don't think that includes Pat Shurmur, by the way. So I don't think he's thinking like that at all. I don't know what the plan is. I think the plan has been, now at this point, drawn out to the point where it's really hard to tell what is what. And yeah, I don't know. I think that the idea that he would take a stud defensive guy at 6 makes a lot of sense, but I think that he won't do that unless if he has the quarterback position solidified first.
Yeah, and I think one thing I will add is that ultimately I do believe Dave Gettleman will make the decision. You made an interesting point there regarding Pat Shurmur, and I won't reveal who because it was spoken to me off the record, but I did have a conversation during an interview once with a former NFL head coach who was in the league just a few years ago, and we talked about the major decision that the franchise he was coaching made to draft a quarterback in the first round. And what I found most interesting was that the quarterback they selected, he didn't want. He didn't have him rated even in his top 2. The quarterback who he wanted and who he rated number 1 overall did not jive with the general manager. And go figure, the player that they selected was who the general manager wanted. So I agree with you regarding Pat Shurmur versus Gettleman in that standpoint. But as far as the quarterback plan goes, Client 9, I think that we have to wait this one out because I actually think that you're getting the feeling Gettleman will be going for a stud at 6. I'm getting the feeling Gettleman's going to make a trade of bad value to move up and select Dwayne Haskins. That's where I would predict if a gun to my head, I had to make a prediction right now. T-Fed asks us, if they draft Haskins, fine. Keep Eli as $23 million mentor. But if they trade for Rosen, he must start day 1. As they only have 4 years of Rosen's rookie deal left. Thoughts?
I don't know if he has to start right off the bat. The only, but maybe I'm wrong there. I don't know. I haven't really played that out in my mind. The only thing that I'm just thinking with a lot of the only reason why you want, is there any reason why, I don't know this answer, is there any reason why you want him to play 4 years instead of 3, right? Other than the fact that you get the player on the field. Like, am I missing something there?
Yeah, I mean, we disagree here. I think what you might be missing, Nick, is that you're losing another year of that rookie deal. So you're getting closer to the point where you then have to pay him a huge salary against the cap, and you can no longer – and really the best way to win the NFL is that window of the rookie deal.
Right. So, but no, I get that. But if I don't think he has to start day one, because you still have the payment option, even with, I guess what they're saying is they want to cut Manning to free up that capital. I get that. The only thing that I'm just thinking about that some people don't realize, and I want to actually check the math on this, from a salary perspective, there's obviously a difference between quarterback and defensive end, right? But either way, the delta is a lot smaller than it is from a quarterback to the rest of the team. So what I'm saying is, although you want to have a franchise quarterback, you're at some point going to have to pay that franchise quarterback. So what if you had a defensive ends on rookie deals that were of higher priority? Like there's other ways to splice it. So I don't look at that it would have to be a must start on day one for a guy that they trade for if they do trade for Rosen. Just because you would lose only one deal, because I think for 1 year of the deal, because I think if you're going to trade for a guy like that, I think you're going to want to lock him up after that rookie deal. Like, you're making that type of projection.
Yeah, you're definitely making that type of projection, Nick, but really I don't think it comes down to that, at least not for me. For me, it comes down to you want to maximize the amount of years where you have a quarterback on his rookie deal. And of course, that would also come with me. It wouldn't mean I want them to keep Manning and bench him. If they're going to keep Manning no matter what, obviously then we can talk about it. It's a different story. But once you made that trade, I think Eli should immediately be released. Even though it would mean if the Giants don't trade for Rosen before March 17th, they're guaranteeing at least another $5 million against the cap to Eli Manning, because his roster bonus is due on March 17th. So ideally, that would be one reason to go against your plan earlier of waiting and kind of like beating the trade market on Rosen. But at the same time, even if they don't get it done before then and they play the market out and get a better trade value in return for in the Rosen trade, I still think they should eat the rest of Eli Manning's salary by a dead cap by releasing him. Yes, it would mean $11 million of dead cap, but it would also mean another $12 million to spend to help the roster elsewhere. And the big deal with Rosen for me coming out and why I was so high on him was that I thought he was ready to play from day one. Obviously, it didn't look that way behind Arizona's pathetic offensive line, ranked, like as I said, 32, injuries across the board, all 5 starters. No, in my opinion, no wide receiver on the outside who could separate. Obviously, they had Larry Fitzgerald, big name, plays the slot, didn't separate that well last year. Went through 2 offensive coordinators in 1 year. But again, if you're trading for Rosen, I'm starting him day one. And honestly, Nick, for me, I think if I were the Giants and I drafted Haskins, I would also be releasing Eli. I think what the Jets did last year, what the Bills did last year, even what the Cardinals did to some extent, not really though, because they did pay Bradford, even though they released him midseason, is the right way to go about it. Throw him right in, maximize the amount of years you can get on that rookie contract, but also more importantly, maximize the amount of reps you can get that quarterback with his supporting cast. Saquon Barkley under contract, Odell Beckham under contract, Ingram under contract for at least another 2 years after this one. Or no, sorry, 3 years starting now. So to me, that's what I would do, but I can see your point of view as well on that.
I can also see too that they could make the decision and then Eli retires.
Yeah, that agreed. I can see that too for sure. Actually, that's an interesting point. Would Eli, they taught that's not a bad call. I like that.
And I'm not saying that's what they're trying to do, but
no.
And it's almost like if that happens, then they're kind of in a really weird situation.
Yeah, they are.
They don't have really a backup that you want for a rookie, and they kind of have to deal with it. Because I just think that if you're going to make this team more and more volatile for a guy in his last year whose dad's already said that he wants a winning year, you're not projecting that for the next 12 months, basically. We'll see.
Moving on for our last question of the day, Black Mountain asks, now that the Giants won't allocate the $11 million to Landon, can you see them bringing back Jamon Brown and signing Darrell Williams?
Yeah, definitely for both. I think they're bidding for Darrell Williams. I mistakenly got bid on Twitter, retweeting a fake tweet that Darrell Williams was given the franchise tag yesterday, which is pretty embarrassing. But yeah, no, I think they're absolutely going to go after him, and they could definitely get both.
No doubt. I agree with you 100% on that. And I think that this was this was the reason. I'm sorry that had happened. Because I'm sorry, it's my bad there. I think that the reason they let Landon Collins hit the open market is because they have bigger ideas for the allocation of the cap space that would go to him.
Makes sense. Checks out.
Yep. All right, guys, that's all we have for today on this show. We're obviously going to be doing a lot more of these now that the offseason's finally kicked into full gear. You can definitely expect one next week around the start of free agency, maybe recapping day one, maybe a preview. We'll see when we get there. Once again, I appreciate everybody who listens in, everybody who interacts with us on Twitter and has all the nice things that they do have to say about the podcast. But especially I appreciate those who subscribe and download on iTunes. Believe it or not, it makes a massive difference for us in growing this podcast and trying to get it, to a bigger stage for you guys so we can do it more often, so we can get more great content out there. We're planning to do some interesting interviews as well this offseason, so look forward to that. And as usual, please do us a favor and also rate and subscribe us on iTunes. That will help us a lot. But Nick, where can we find the rest of your work in the meantime before next podcast?
Before next podcast, definitely probably just on Twitter, handle Team Manic21. I also contribute over at Inside the Pylon and Cover1.net.
Awesome. And you guys can find my work on 247sports.com/New York Giants or CBS Sports app, and obviously on Twitter at Dan Schneider NFL. Apologize for some of the technical difficulties today. We'll definitely do better next time, but we are happy we got a chance to recap the combine and preview what's to come next. On that note, as usual, I like to end these ones. Go Giants.